All right, everybody, welcome back to Little Warrior Church Daily Bible Reading. Hope you guys are going to have a fantastic day. Today is September the 23rd. And if you could go ahead and like the podcast wherever you're at, and we're live right now on the Wisdom app. If you would like to download that and just listen to us live, that'd be great. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for everything that you've given us. Help us understand what we're about to read today as we're going through the book of Esther. In your name I pray. Amen. So today, as stated, we're going to the book of Esther. Esther's a very interesting book. It's the non-religious book, but some say it can be comparable to the book of Romans, which is pretty interesting. Maybe we'll do a study on that one day. So let's get to it, to chapter 4. Now when Mordecai found out all that was done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the middle of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. One of the officials pretty much is doing a Hitler thing and trying to make a decree to destroy all the Jews. Mordecai is a Jew and he is mourning for his people, which is really, really sad. There's no reason why they should just go out and kill all the Jews. Haman is just hell-bent, let's put it that way, hell-bent on destroying the Jews because the Jews destroyed his family years and years and years ago. Verse 2, he came even before the king's gate, for no one is allowed inside the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. They're about to be destroyed, and it's just a matter of time before it comes into the king's palace, and Mordecai and Esther are destroyed. Verse 4, Esther's maiden and her eunuchs came and told her this, and the queen was exceedingly grieved. She sent sackcloth to Mordecai to replace his sackcloth, but he didn't receive it. Then Esther called for Hakash, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and commanded him to go to Mordecai to find out what this was and why. So Hakash went out to Mordecai to city square, which was before the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasurers for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given out to Susa to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare it to her, and to urge her to go into the king to make supplication to him, and to make requests before him for her people. This is a huge deal because Esther hadn't been called by the king in over a month. She can't just go into the king's sanctuary, if you will, and just talk to him. If she burst open the doors and started talking to him unannounced, she could be killed. That's weird to us, but that was commonplace for the Persian Empire. You just can't go see the king, you have to be called in. Verse 9, Hakash came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hakash and gave him a message to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's province know that whoever, whether man or woman, comes to the king and to the inner court without being called, there is no law for him, and he be put to death, except those to whom the king might hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. I have not been called to come to the king's these 30 days. She hasn't been called for over a month. She just can't go see him. They told Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai asked them to return this answer to Esther. Don't think to yourself that you will escape in the king's house any more than all the Jews. For you have remained silent now, then relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Who knows if you haven't come to the kingdom for such a time as this? He basically said God will find a way to save his people, but it's such a time as this, and you can do something right now. Then Esther asked them to answer Mordecai, Go gather together all the Jews who are present in Susa and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day, and I, my maidens, will also fast the same way. Then I will go into the king, which is against the law, and I will perish. I perish. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. She is exceedingly sorrowful for her family and all the Jews, and she feels like she can do something. She also feels like if she escapes this, then punishment will come for her in the end. So it's up to her right now to do something about it. Chapter 5. Now on the third day, Esther put on her royal clothing and stood in the inner court of the king's house next to the king's house. The king sat on his royal throne in the royal house next to the entrance of the house. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter. She had been fasting for 3 days. Can you imagine the walk into the palace? How nervous she would have been. And so when she walks in, the king spares her life and holds out the golden scepter. If she touches it, she won't die. And that's what the king did. Verse 3, then the king asked her, what would you like, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you even to half the kingdom. Now, don't make any special exceptions for this. This was just a thing that kings said. It's basically pretty much saying this is a blank check. How much do you want? He's not literally going to give us half his kingdom. He's just giving her a blank check pretty much and just saying, what do you want? Esther said, if it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Now, she didn't burst up in there and tell her immediately what she wanted. This could be a myriad of reasons. He probably wasn't in the best mood. He probably was doing something else. There's a myriad of reasons why she didn't say it to them, but she came up with a plan to butter him up, pretty much. Esther said, if it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. So she is inviting the person that she does not like, which is Haman, who is killing her family. Verse 5, then the king said, bring Haman quickly so that it may be done as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The king is absolutely head over heels with this plan. Banquet? That sounds like a great idea. So he's doing that. A banquet to us is like a whole platter of food. A banquet to them would pretty much be wine and desserts. So that's basically what she is inviting these two men to do. Come have wine and dessert. The king said to Esther, as at the banquet of wine, what is your petition? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Even to half the kingdom, it shall be performed. Then Esther answered and said, my petition and my request is this, that I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. So again, she reads the room, she reads the king, and still decides it's not the right time. Something's off here. Maybe she's nervous, maybe she is still trying to pray. Again, there could be a myriad of reasons. My intuition says it's all of them. She's incredibly nervous. She still wants to butter up the king as much as possible. And verse 9, then Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and he didn't stand up nor move for him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Haman hates the Jews. He does not know that Esther is a Jew because she's been hiding it from the king. But Haman knows that Mordecai is a Jew. So he hates him automatically. And since Mordecai does not bow down or stand up in his presence, Haman is extremely upset. He has all the riches in the world, and yet one man standing, he's upset. Not one man not standing, he's obsessed with him. Go figure. Verse 10, nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. There he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches and multitude of his children, all the things of which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman also said, yes, Esther the queen, let no man come in with the king to the banquet that she has prepared but myself, and tomorrow I am also invited by her together with the king. Yet all this avail me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. He has all this, he has all the riches, he has 10 sons, which was accounted to a lot of riches back then, and yet he just hates Mordecai because Mordecai's not giving him the honor that he thinks he deserves. Verse 14, then Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him, let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on it. Now, when we think of gallows, we think of a noose, we think of a rope. The Persians were different. The Persian, when they say gallows, they mean a pike with a spear on it, and they would literally impale you on it. So instead of thinking of a gallows with a noose, he's talking about a huge spike and impaling that person on top of it so everybody can see. And it's 50 cubits high, which would have been really tall. So he wants to impale him where everybody can see his dishonor, is pretty much what he's saying. Go in merrily with the king to the banquet. This pleased Haman, so that he had the gallows made. So he had the gallows made. Chapter 6. On that night the king couldn't sleep. He commanded the book of the records of the chronicles to be brought, and they were read to the king. It was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtha and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, who tried to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. The king said, what honor and dignity has been given to Mordecai for this? The king's servant who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. The king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had come into the outer court of the king's house to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. Back in chapter, I think, 2, Mordecai told Esther about these two men who were going to kill the king. So they found this to be true, and they killed those men, but nothing was done for Mordecai. No reward, no nothing. So now Haman is going to go talk to the king about impaling him on a spike, and we'll see what happens. The king's servant said to him, behold, Haman stands in the court. Perfect. Haman's there. The king said, let him come in. So Haman came in. The king said to him, what shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman said in his heart, who would the king delight in honor more than myself? Haman thinks, I'm going to be honored today. So he's going to grant my request and hang Mordecai on the spike. Verse 7. Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal clothing be brought, which the king uses to wear, and a horse that a king rides on, and on the head of which the royal crown is set. Let the clothing and the horse be delivered to the hand of the one king, most noble princes, that they may array the man whom the king delights to honor with him, and have him ride on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. This is exactly what Haman wants for himself. He wants all the honor. He has all the riches. He just wants all the honor. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, and take the clothing and the horse, as you have said, and do this for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. So Haman says, let a prince, let someone high honor, take this man around the city, put the king's clothing on him on a horseback, and show him to the city. Who do you think is going to take Mordecai around the city? Haman. Haman's going to do it. So this is actually incredibly hilarious. Verse 11. Then Haman took the clothing and the horse and arrayed Mordecai, and had him ride through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So Haman's doing this, but he's doing it reluctantly. Verse 12. Mordecai came back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and having his head covered. Haman recounted to Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, said to him, if Mordecai before you, whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but you will surely fall before him. While they were yet talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hurried to bring Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Chapter 7, we're going to verse 10. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. The king said to Esther on the second day of the banquet of wine, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be performed. Now don't read into that too much. He's not going to give her half the kingdom. He's pretty much just saying, here's a blank check. How much do you want? What do you want? Please give it to me. At this point, he wants to know so badly what she wants. And I'm pretty sure at this point he probably would give her half the kingdom. Verse 3. Then Esther the queen answered, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me my petition. At this point, he's saying your life. No, your life is fine. You're fine. And my people at my request. She's finally coming out that she's a Jew. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for male and female servants, I would have held my peace, although the adversary could not have compensated for the king's loss. She's saying, if we had been sold into slavery, I would say nothing, but my people are literally being destroyed, so I have to say something. Then the king Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen, who is he? Where is he who dared presume in his heart to do so? Esther said, an adversary and an enemy, even the wicked Haman. She's pointing to Haman, who declared this, who wrote this down on paper, and the king signed. Now remember, by law, Persian law, the king cannot go back on something once he signed it. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. I think that's a huge understatement. He's about to die. The king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went to the palace garden. King is so upset, probably shaking at this point, so upset. But I think he left the room because he realized there's nothing he can do. He already signed it. He can't take it back. Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. I think so. But he is literally groveling at Esther's feet. A Jew, woman, no less. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman had fallen to the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, well, will he even assault the queen in front of me in this house? As the word went out the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So what does this mean? It means he was groveling, and how they ate, they would eat reclining, kind of like the Greeks would. And he was begging for his life to Esther, which was a big deal. And he got so close, it looked like he was about to attack her. And maybe it looked like the way, maybe it didn't. But the king came in, probably thinking, now's my chance to get rid of him. How am I going to do this? And he came in. Haman looked like he was attacking Esther, and he said, now's my chance. Will he even assault the queen in front of me in its house? As the word went out to the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now they are of royal line, so even in the banquet hall, they're not alone. There would have been guards everywhere. Covering Haman's face is showing us that he is a dead man. They covered his face that no one can see him, not even the king. And it is a representation back then of what they did when he was a dead man. Dead man walking. Verse 9, then Habonai, one of the eunuchs who were in the king, said, behold, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman has made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king, is standing at Haman's house. The king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath was pacified. Notice where the gallows was. Behold, the 50 gallows which Haman had made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king, is standing at Haman's house. So not only did he make a gallows for Mordecai, but it's in his front yard. That's how much this guy hated. But now he is hanging on the pike. That's pretty intense, if you ask me. Let's go on to some Proverbs, and then we'll be done. Proverbs 21. (21 through 22). He who follows after righteousness and kindness finds life, righteousness, and honor. A wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the strength of its confidence. That's exactly what happened. He was too confident. Haman was too confident and thought that he couldn't lose. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for everything you've given us. Help us understand this, what we just read, and may we apply it to our lives, that we may be humble and not seek honor as much as Haman did. He had everything at his fingertips, and yet he threw it all away because he was prideful. May we take that and apply it to our lives that we may be humble and come in your presence just like Esther was. Amen. Pray. Amen. All right, guys, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you later. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.